do we want a track or don't we want a track? Because if we want a track, this is possibly the only place where it can be done. I doubt we are anywhere close to being 1,000 competitive drivers, but there are tens of thousands of people that have fast bikes or they have fast cars that might not be interested in the competitive aspect, but would need or want a space where they can use their car or their bike fast, safe, and without being on public roads. Out of the nothing that we have a competitive group, which is unbelievable, to be quite fair. You know, we don't have facility and yet there is competition. And there is so much willingness to do it, we go abroad to do it.
The one in Racalmuto is just 0.3 of a kilometer, bigger than the plan here, and everyone is happy with that.
If there ever is the need to come together, it's now.
There are a lot of people, as soon as you hear racetrack, it's like you're going to destroy Malta. Most of it is green area, can be used obviously for other types of sports like cycling and marathons and all these.
No, I want it so much more. It makes so much sense, Nick. It's incredible.
A few months and it could be unviable because you'll have a factory being developed right in the middle of the track and guys, game over. There's no turning back with that. The presentation we had last week was basically to get the motorsports enthusiast in general. In fact, the invitation was open to the enthusiast in general to come and have a look at what can be done and what a possible racetrack would look like. The objective was that, and what I did was I had a number of presentation sheets, including the 3D animation, which explained basically what the concept was about. Now, for a track to be compliant, there are many regulations. This is like a small Bible of FIA regulations. Without going into the nitty-gritty of it, basically you've got a minimum track length. So what we're after here is a Formula 3, so that's a minimum of 2 kilometers. That's the minimum, absolute minimum. You need to have a minimum width, and that is of 12 meters, and 15 meters on the starting grid, all the way up to the first corner. Then you need your runoffs, which maybe I should have started from there because that is the most important one, safety. And the runoffs are a function of, as I said, maybe before the speeds at which the vehicle is traveling at that particular point in time. And the rest, the ancillaries, so we're talking about garages, paddocks, stands, access, and those were, say, the parameters that govern the basic geometry of the track. So to speak, the framework is there.
How much space are we talking about?
We're talking about 17 hectares. Now, 17 hectares is equivalent to 170,000 square meters. It's large, it's huge, it's really big. But we are nested within the industrial estate of Halfar. So basically, there are a number of factories and we're dodging them and going through them and still within the regulations. And that's the interesting bit of it, because we're doing the best of what we have available. The land is still available. It just about fits, just about. And I would like to get a discussion as quickly as possible at a table where all the stakeholders are there, so we can talk about the viability of this or not. Because today it's viable, maybe in a few weeks' time or a few months' time it won't be, because industry would have developed the land. Just to clarify, predominantly the 17 hectares are industrial land. So by right, they should be built as factories. Now, what we have studied is the fact that this is the only parcel of land that is large enough, that is undeveloped, within a development zone, that can house a minimum FIA track. Do we want a track or don't we want a track? Because if we want a track, this is possibly the only place where it can be done. I believe it's the only place where it can be done. And it can be done now. In the future, I guess it won't be.
So if we don't act now, it could be too late.
Yes.
There is nowhere else. So
Nowhere else. Nowhere else.
there's nowhere else.
Assuming that it is unacceptable to build in landscapes that are what we call out of development zone, ODZ. So that's my starting point, that ODZ is not a viable option, that it has to be within a development zone. And this is what we're talking about here.
Should we, though, assume that ODZ is not viable, saying that this is a street, that this is a road that we are, 90% of the construction is a road.
Yes, I see the point, and probably a lot of my friends and colleagues would argue that way. Now, this is maybe where my personal opinion tends to diverge a little bit towards the motorsport and leans more into the environmental aspect of it. I think that as long as we have a viable option within a development zone, we should look at only that, because that is the sensible way of doing it. That is the way of doing a track that is sustainable. The most difficult thing is to accommodate bikes, and this proposal does that. So the target point, or where we started off from, where okay, what are the runoffs that you need for a bike, and assuming that if it's good for a bike, it's going to be good for a car. Basically, a bike needs a lot more care, in the sense that obviously a bike is more exposed than a car is, and the runoffs, what we call runoffs, which is basically if things go wrong, you need a space where you don't find obstacles and you hurt yourself.
Correct.
So those are what we call runoffs.
What's the distance? How do you measure a track?
If you have the width of a track, in this case is 12 meters, you take the center line,
Okay.
and you project the center line throughout the duration of the closed circuit, and that is the length of the track. In this case, we're talking about 2 kilometers. Now, there's also the possibility of extending this from 2 to 3 kilometers by incorporating a road section. Now, in the spirit of Macau, in the spirit of a number of international races. The problem is that obviously on the road section your runoffs are very restricted or impossible. So again, when we're talking about bikes, the road sections are kind of out of the question, because well, I think the Isle of Man, the only one that has again, which is
I don't really suggest it. Obviously the mentality here in Malta is still a big bit, but still Isle of Man, it's a tradition. They earn their living, the island earn their living obviously from the event, so it's completely another world over there. So I consider more safety first, which in that case we stick to the 2 kilometers from my point of view of bikes.
So Isle of Man is one of the more dangerous tracks, Ushek.
For sure.
It is one of the.
It's a street course. In fact, it's not a proper racing circuit. It's running around the village.
what you can distinguish is between a road race and a track race.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the road race is the one that is without any safety, or it's you sheerly depending on your ability to stay on the road, and if you get it wrong, God help you. And then the track, if you get it wrong, or you assume, actually the designer assumes you're going to get it wrong, and the designer does his best to avoid obstacles in the zone where you're going to fall off. In this case, after the straight of 700 meters is the straight where most motorbikes would reach terminal velocity. They'll get as fast as
Yes.
we're talking about superbikes, 300 kilometers an hour.
700 meters, you're saying?
700 meters.
Yes.
So this is, you're talking about. So if you fall off your bike at that speed, you need to have enough distance to stop without smashing into something. And in this case, we're talking about a runoff of 160 meters. So we're talking 2 football pitches nearly. That is a runoff. So you fall off your bike at 300 kilometers an hour, and you've got 2 football pitches till you hit something, which normally is enough, or at least it's within specifications to be safe. Right? So that we have.
So Formula One can't run in just 3 kilometers. It has to have much longer distances, but will require obviously larger areas, which that track, which is a fantastic track in my opinion, the footprint is not large enough for an F1 track. So that's basically
yes, an F1 track would take twice or 3 times the size. So it's unviable. It would be unrealistic to expect a Formula One, because Formula One needs a lot of ancillary facilities as well to accommodate all the spectators. We're talking about a magnitude that is stratospherical in terms of Maltese territory. At face value, everything seems to fit. Phase 2 would be to do a detailed design, which would include more detailed ways of, because what happens is if you have a zone where you need, say, 100 meters runoff, but you don't have 100 meters, you have 50, for instance. There are ways of using types of materials which are more aggressive in stopping. You can bank it as well, so again you have an inclination and the gravity is working against you. There are ways and means of accommodating safe zones. Again, that is the detailed design. Now, that would be the next phase.
A lot of clubs are not formed because we don't have anywhere where to practice. You don't have where to race, and you end up not racing, or else, like for example me and Paul do, we go overseas. But not everybody has the time to do it and the means to do it. So if there is a track, there are a lot of options then of types of motorsport you can practice in it. Car scene, there are open wheelers, there are touring cars, there are club cars, there are, when I say club cars, for example, Honda Club, which will have their Honda Cup, for example, or as there is in UK, they have the Mini Cooper Club, which they have the Cooper Cup.
So the alternative to having a track in Malta is going to Sicily, because that's the easiest and probably
the quickest, the shortest,
most efficient.
Yes, exactly.
So this has now become a very expensive hobby, for the simple fact that we just don't have a track that we can use. What's the name of the track there?
At the moment, RecTalk.
Okay, I've heard of that track before. How long is it approximately? What's a lap like?
2.3 if I'm not mistaken.
And that's kilometers?
Kilometers,
so
yes.
We're very close here. Do you go up for the day or do you go up for the weekend?
Usually go for the weekend, because even weather, you have to consider that maybe from 3 days you have like a day of rain or 2 days of rain, and then you just manage to hit a day of circuit. And if you're lucky, you do 3 days, you know. Weekend will cost you certain amount, and then if you include weekdays, it will cost you less, because obviously the peak is weekend, Saturday and Sunday. But if you go like Thursday, Friday, you get it half the price. You start learning on these things, you start to bunch the group.
And how much does that cost?
In Sicily, a weekend it will cost us like €250.
Okay.
You have, I'm saying like Friday, Saturday and Sunday, 4 bikes.
Okay. Because Nick, I told you that we don't have, I mean, we mentioned that we have no track in Malta, but we do have the coast road, eh?
Yes.
So we have a track. It's more dangerous, there's no runoff, there's nothing, but we have a track.
What I'd like to mention, Mark, is the difference between a competitive driver and an enthusiast. Now, competitive drivers, whether it's motorbikes or vehicle or the other vehicles, it is a very small number. I doubt we are anywhere close to being 1,000 competitive drivers, but there are tens of thousands of people that have fast bikes or that have fast cars that might not be interested in the competitive aspect, but would need or want a space where they can use their car or their bike fast, safe, and without being on public roads. Now, there's the concept of, as I said before, competitive driving and track day driving. Now, track day driving, call it a practice weekend or practice day. That, I believe, there is a lot of interest in that, and that we're talking about. I would say thousands of people that would be interested. So this would primarily be used by a very large spectrum of the population, and then it will be used more intensively by the competitive individuals. naturally, once there is the facility for competitiveness, you get more competition, so the sport will grow. So at the moment, with Stife, we have, out of the nothing that we have a competitive group, which is unbelievable, to be quite fair. We don't have facility, and yet there is competition, and there is so much willingness to do it. We go abroad to do it. Now, I think we're inclined towards this motorsport business as a population. So this is probably an investment in sport that could yield very interesting results.
Given the facilities we have, we have very good results, and we don't even have our own track, which is quite interesting.
To be fair, to have said it all, the quarter-mile racetrack, which is a stone throw away from where we're talking about as a lawn, has yielded phenomenal results. Duncan McAuliffe won European Championships last year, and we're talking about an extremely competitive arena. Again, the facility exists in Malta, so there was the space to yield that result, and we're there, top level. And motorsport has many disciplines, so quarter-mile racing, drag racing, is probably one of the most demanding financially, because we talk about monsters of vehicles, and it does restrict a lot the possibility that people have, depending on your ability. But say karting, for instance. Karting is one of the most inexpensive, so to speak, and it is the nursery of all motorsports. Now, the facility that we're proposing here includes a fully fledged FIA karting track, which I believe is probably the heart of the facility, because from there everything else takes off at a later point. And having said that, the local club does have a parcel of land allocated towards that facility. I know they're very close to start the construction of the track, but it's not there yet. And what we are proposing here is a slight shift of that approved track. So the circuit track, the large circuit track, can revolve around it. It's a matter of sitting down and having all the stakeholders around the same table. And stakeholders, I'm talking about motorsports, including the karting people, industry, political figures. They all have to be there. And guys, we're running out of time. Let's talk about it, and let's talk about it seriously.
Another point I wanted to mention, going to, like, again in Sicily, you have apart from Macalmuto, you have a state track, which is Pergusa. Pergusa, I've been racing in Pergusa the last 20 years for sure. Lately they did upgrades. It's a state track. It's not a person track. After 5 o'clock in the evening, they open it for the public. It's a recreational area. You can go take your bicycle there. You can walk with your family there. Strictly after 5, no vehicles inside, which people can consider this kind of thing, because it's not just motorsport. If it's gonna be managed well, the paddock area can be used for like small concerts or whatsoever. I'm not imagining or inventing all this stuff. This thing exists in foreign tracks, and they try to get the maximum from such plan. So if they incorporate all these things, it's not just motorsport. It can be much more.
I agree with you 100%, Paul. In fact, when this came out, I got approached by a number of cyclists and cyclists representative of clubs, and said that abroad such tracks are used a lot by the cycling community. Again, cycling is a big sport locally. It's growing very, very fast. I would say there are thousands of cyclists that cycle on the road, and there isn't a safe place for them to do it. Now, abroad, they do it a lot. They'll have slots, they'll have days, they'll have after hours, and they'll be dedicated to cyclists. And in fact, probably what we should be doing is promoting it on that front as well. So we'll have a broader attack of people that would be interested in this. In fact, I have meetings scheduled with the cyclist lobby group, and they're very, very interested. They're very interested in this.
It's almost like a national park. Sounds really good. You opened my eyes to something new. I had no idea that it's used for something like this.
For example, if you go like Monza, I'm saying the pinnacle of a natural resort, okay? Once I've been there like in a camping area with my bike, a road bike I'm meaning. Just went there with my bike. First of all, they told me to switch off the engine. I pushed the bike because it's a natural resort because of the burden, so I agree with that. So. But then you have specific hours, okay, that it's open for motorsport. They agree that from time to shift to the other time there can be motorsport. After that certain hours, again back to where it was, and so it can be done. People have to agree and have to understand the needs of others. Okay,
I think that's one of the biggest problem. I think people tend to rush into ideas, people who are not in motorsport. Whenever they see some post or something around the track, no, just no, because they don't know what exactly is the track. I think that's one of the problems that we have here. They rush too much in it. And as Paul said, I mean, I've been to tracks and mostly in UK, they have curfews where they tell you, listen, until this time, as exactly Paul said, you cannot switch the car on, you cannot switch off. You have exhaust dB limits, which obviously need to be promoted in the track.
Mark, I wanted to ask, because I'm not too knowledgeable with this. What are the regulations like in terms of sound mitigation?
Well, basically, let's mention Brands Hatch. I've been to Brands Hatch quite a lot lately. They have time curfews where you cannot switch on the engine, obviously, before certain times. You have to have dB levels, exhaust dB levels. So a lot of people think that as a race car, it must be noisy, too noisy. It's not always the case. No, it can be very noisy, yes, but it's not always the case. Obviously, if it's very noisy and the track is close to villages, which, for example, let's say again Brands Hatch, you'll be driving inside, you'll say the sat-nav will tell you you'll arrive at your destination in 400 meters and you're still next to the houses. You say, I think we're in the wrong place, but then you'll just turn and you'll find the track. You have the exhaust systems, which in that track particularly you need to have a certain amount of dB level, obviously, and if you exceed that dB level, you will not be allowed to start your car, basically. Then obviously there are a lot of other measures which they use, like long stretches of trees, which eliminates the sound that will travel. They have also like sort of curved walls to direct the sound upwards. There are loads of things to do and to clear this type of problem.
Of all places, we've got the airport there, and we have the quarter mile, so
Yes.
we're not.
But it's good to address this, because the residents of Berzabuja are the ones that have been most vociferous on this aspect of all the comments that were floating on Facebook on this. The ones that were negative, and maybe I could understand where they're coming from, where the people of Berzabuja saying, guys, you know, we've suffered airport, free ports, this and that, we don't need more. But what we can say is that there are many different ways of mitigating and eliminating the sound emissions of this track. To put it in perspective, as I said before, the quarter-mile racetrack, which houses the largest scale of vehicles, the noise generated there is by far higher than circuit racers or
Definitely.
And as, again, if the noise is a problem, then you can put in regulations in place. So if your vehicle doesn't have a silencer of this size, of this magnitude, then you can't race, you can't use the car. sound shouldn't be a problem because it's probably the easiest one to mitigate.
From a biker perspective, obviously a circuit track, it's a must with runoff area and stuff. I always disagree with road racing as such when you do it, and as I said before, I do like watching Isle of Man TT, but I don't really support it myself because I know the risk, you know. There's no tolerance for an accident, so runoff area, it's a must. I experience myself crashes and falls, obviously it's part of the game, you know. I take all the precautions and full gear and protection, they never end. And the more you adapt yourself with the ideal clothing, you figure out that that's the right way. And the risk is always there, but you try to do your best, obviously, and you won't leave anything unconsidered, so you don't hurt yourself. But again, if then you don't taste the track and you start doing the stupid guy on the road, the risk factor is so big. Maybe you don't have another chance, you know. Again, I've been doing this for more than 24 years, as I said, and I lost friends on the road. I try to guide people as much as I can. I'm quite satisfied because I started like a couple of friends, like three friends, 5 friends. Now we're more than 40 actual competitors in Sicily and Italy. And 2 weeks time we have a group of 15 that are going to Misano. We bunched that group. We try to with a group because it will cost you less. We put bikes on trailers instead of 1, you know, accommodation, a room of 3 instead of on your own. You group these things and you make them. Obviously, you can go frequently because motorsport needs practice. And from a bike perspective, we're at 0 here in Malta. We don't have nothing. I do try and practice a bit of motocross, and there's a facility here in Malta, luckily. So we try to keep fit. But then obviously you have to shift your abilities from motocross to road racing. It's like you're training basketball to go and play a football match, just for those who don't understand much. So, but that's the situation. We try to get most of it.
Mm-hmm. Look, let's just take a quick turn. What about the financial side of this? How feasible would it be, Kiku? There might be 2 options, no? It would be a self-funded circuit or government-funded.
Yes, there are many formulas, there are a couple actually. What is most likely to happen is a PPP, we call it, a public-private partnership, where the government would release the land for a number of years, say 50 years or 60 years, and the private sector would invest the capital to build it and then run it as well. So that is probably the model that will take shape if this does materialize. And then you've got the fully state funded facility, which obviously was a bit more interesting for the motorsport group, but it's not that easy because we're talking about a lot of money here. Now, what's very critical as well is the maintenance of the track. Now, the maintenance is a function of the amount of usage that it has, in the sense that what we've incorporated in this is the road safety facility. Now, the road safety facility is an ancillary aspect of the track where you get specialized advanced road skills, in the sense where you would have parts of the track that would be flooded with water, and you do emergency braking and emergency tackling of obstacles, skills which you cannot learn on the road, but you need to have a safe zone to do it. So this facility includes that, dedicated spaces that are independent to the track, and that will increase the revenue, the daily revenue, because you get all the drivers participating or using the facility at some point or later. Now, in terms of capital expenditure, again, I believe the business model does exist. So a couple of years ago, there was an expression of interest for the setup of a motorsport facility. It was very open-ended, and the result was proposals that were very large and unfeasible because of that dimension. But there were 4 or 5 different joint ventures that pitched in for it. So there is a lot of interest from the privates to run something of the sort. Again, the business model is a factor of the size of the facilities so the financial discussion has to revolve around a particular design, right? So the next step would be to formulate a business model on this. But I believe the groundwork is there. It exists. What I'd like to say that's unique to the island is that whereas abroad you've got track days and track weekends because the logistics of travelling from your town to a track will take you 3 or 4 hours, so it pays you to take a hotel and get your vehicle there, park it, and so you're there for a weekend. In this case, we could talk about track afternoons or track mornings, or so your slots become multiples of a day, not a whole day. So it becomes, again, it's a broader spectrum because you don't have the logistics of having to travel 4 hours to get to the track. So it becomes much easier to use.
Nick, I couldn't help but notice how cool the track looks. No, seriously. Now I could see the perimeter. I could see that you're really using you're using as much as you can of the available land. But is that track inspired by a similar track abroad?
I'll be honest. I have driven on RecTalk before, so knowing the track there, knowing that works, and knowing that RecTalk is relatively small, I looked at that first. So my reference point was often RecTalk. So to say, if it works at RecTalk, it's going to work here. So before I went through the whole regulations of the FIA annexes, I was looking at RecTalk saying, okay, a 20-meter radius curve is the smallest that there is at RecTalk. So if I use that as my minimum, I should work, and basically that is it. Naturally, if you have to try and fit RecTalk here, it won't fit because we are dodging around factories here. So this track can only be, put it this way, this track could fit somewhere that is total virgin landscape somewhere, but you can't get any other track and fit it here. So this is a custom design for what is left over and that is available. So so to speak, it is a unique design. You won't find something like that.
Should this go through, it seems like it will be the only green area. It looks like a park from here.
In practice, it would be a green lung, so to speak, in the industrial estate, because there's a lot of landscaping that you include. In fact, wherever I could fit belts of trees, I fit them in, again, keeping in mind first the safety. So if the tree is not an obstacle and there's a space for it, I'll put it in, and that's what I did. And there are hundreds of trees that are included at this point of development.
And I would assume that 90% of the time, the sound pollution wouldn't affect anyone because most of the cars would be, I mean, they could be sports cars, but they've got catalytic converters, they've got they're street legal, so they're not going to sound any louder than they would if they were driving on the coast road.
What I'd like to tap onto is the need for the motorsport group in general. I'm talking about all the disciplines here: motorbikes, karting, hill climb people, circuit racers, to join forces, so to speak, together and create a united front towards the need for this track. Unfortunately, we suffer from a degree of disjointedness within the sport. There isn't a uniting factor, and if there ever is the need to come together, it's now. So what my appeal is to anyone who has an interest in a track or leans into motorsport is to do and speak and share and talk about it as much as you can. So at the bottom of it, what I call the grassroots, would make enough push, would push it hard enough for it to come to the top, where the decision-making arm is. Now, the gap is quite large at the moment, but there are many people at the bottom that want it, so it's a matter of joining forces.
There are a lot of people, as soon as you hear racetrack, it's like you're going to destroy Malta. It's not the case. Most of the land will not be developed of the track, as you can see. One can see on the plans here, and on any plans which will include of a circuit. Basically, most of it is green area, recreational areas. It can be used obviously for other types of sports like cycling and marathons and all this stuff. So it will not destroy Malta. It will only be a huge land, all right, but there will have it will be a road, basically surrounded with greenery, not buildings, high buildings and factories, etc. So I indulge the public not to rush into things, to see the things before they comment that they don't want the track. Basically, it's something that is missing in Malta. We have a lot of things. Malta is very good and very nice at the moment. It's I think one of the top countries, and I'm really glad that I'm Maltese. But it's something missing, and I think we have we do need the track here in Malta.
So we've got quite a few enthusiasts, and I can imagine that on a Sunday, if this was ever going to come to life, then a Sunday would be one of its busiest days, assuming that there are no competitions, and we've got the public who are using this track on just to run what you bring and whatnot. I mean, how many cars can you have at any given time?
I believe we're talking about 12 to 16 cars maximum.
So we're looking at about 12 to 16 cars every 20 to 30 minutes. Which it could still give everyone enough chance. I mean, you book your slot.
What normally happens, and my colleagues will correct me, is that you've got, say, on a track day, you've got, say, 100 cars that are lined up to use the track. And then you've got half-hour slots, and they come in and out accordingly. You never have 100 cars all at once on a track, not even in Nuremberg. I think you get that kind of...
Exactly. When I say 20 minutes, like a session of 20 minutes, 20 minutes are 20 minutes, yeah?
20 minutes is a lot of time.
Yes.
Well, some cars, some stock cars won't handle 20 minutes for sure.
Definitely.
They get brake failures. From a bike perspective, the rider has to be very fit to last 20 minutes session flat out. So it sounds a little 20 minutes, but believe me, there's quite stressful on the body. That's why we call them athletes.
I really wanted this track, but since we spoke, now I want it so much more. Huh? It makes so much sense, Nick. It's incredible. It is such a good thing to have. Paolo, any closing comments? Something?
Yes. For those who have doubts because of the size of the track, because some might say 2 kilometers is a small track, compared to the big ones, the main ones, which are more than 4 kilometers. But I can assure you, 100% sure, the ones that are actually using foreign tracks at the moment, they can understand me well, and they're 100%, they do agree even with the size. Because they know that it's practical. The one in Ractalmuto is just 0.3 of a kilometer, bigger than the plan here, and everyone is happy with that, even the cost, because obviously if you have a 2 kilometer tracks, it's going to cost you, like, let's compare to Ractalmuto, 250 euros for 3 days. But if you go, for example, to Mugello, 300 euros per day. For a biker to go there and make a day event, it's 300 euros. This is viable. This is even for the local pocket. It's sustainable. So the 2 kilometers, I'm sure they're more than enough. Obviously, it can be bigger. That's bonus, but that's more than enough.
If there are enough people pushing at the bottom, it will eventually get to the top. Now, there is a degree of of commitment from the government to wanting to do this. It's on their electoral manifesto, so it's there, and they've said it many times that they want to do it. But we're running out of time, because this is the only place where it can be done without any overlap on ODZ, and it is, as a matter of fact, industrial land. So there's the industry that has the right to develop that land. Now, we're running out of time, in the sense that at the moment I've accommodated all commitments that are existing on that plot of land. In the sense, we're not proposing to demolish buildings, or we're not proposing to remove permits that have been issued over there. We're talking about land that hasn't been developed yet. Now, with time, it will get developed. There's no question about it. Just a matter of a few months, and it could be unviable, because you'll have a factory being developed right in the middle of the track, and guys, game over. There's no turning back with that. So we're running out of time, and my wish would be that we get talking properly. All we need at this point in time is that we sit down round table, all the stakeholders, and at least hold the brakes on development of that land till we have a proper decision whether we want to track or not. Because this is the only place where it can be done.
X'taħsbu? We close it off. All right, I have a question for you three. Let's see who gets it right. I'll give you a cookie. Okay, I have one in the kitchen. Mela, how many components make up a Formula One car? Who gets the closest number wins a cookie. So, how many components make up a Formula One car?
It's in components, and not as a component, right?
Everything.
I would say 25,000.
Say 17,000.
50.
Closest. 80,000, guys.
80,000.
80,000. Well done, Paolo wins a cookie.
Good, because I'm on diet.
I've built my own racing car.